let's move on to some news before we get into the main course of looking at the semi-finals. So, news. We've got the Super Rugby Draft. The New Zealand Players Association executive, Rob Nichol, has warmly embraced the possibility of a Super Rugby Pacific draft involving Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific nations. How exactly do you think that will work, Harry?
There's so many question marks about this, but it keeps coming back up, right? Like, I think the success of American sport with drafts and bringing young players through, it's just so enticing because of that. And as a fan, I think it'd be so cool to see which young prospect's going to go where. And particularly with the Aussie under-20s pushing the Kiwi under-20s so far at the moment, that maybe it will be a little bit more even than what we're used to. The big thing, there's a couple of big questions. Firstly, eligibility. Like, I don't think if, an 18-year-old Adi Sevilla gets drafted by the Western Force because they've got the first pick, that he's going to be eligible to play for Australia in 5 years. I would like that to be the case, but man, that's going to be a big question mark first and foremost. Yeah. And then obviously also the Kiwis that come to Australia and vice versa need to be eligible for their own nations as well. I think the bigger one is just asking players to move so far across the country or overseas for, let's be honest, like pretty small contracts when they start as well. Like if you're on, I don't know what the minimum contract is in Super Rugby. It's like 60 grand or 80 grand or something like that.
Yeah, it's not a lot. So,
imagine being told, boys, you're moving to Fiji because they got the first draft pick and we're going to pay you 60 grand. And, after the first 2 or 3 years, then you can decide if you want to come home with your family. Like, there's not a knock on Fiji. It'd be a great place to play your footy, but geez, you're uprooting your entire life. It's not like in American sport where you're essentially just flying across the other side of America and getting paid 20 mil straight up in the NFL, like, I know those numbers are facetious, a little bit facetious, but it's chalk and cheese, the financial incentive to do that.
That's it. I mean, didn't we look at, I think earlier this year, we were looking at, isn't rugby leagues, the team salary cap is twice, if not 3 times that of a Super Rugby team as well.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say the positive, though, is in the Major League Rugby, the draft has been very successful there in getting rugby players out of the colleges in Canada and all through across America. That's been a really huge part of a more infant competition in dividing up the players. And it's worked really, really well. So, it's another way.
The problem for me is the goal of Australia and New Zealand rugby is not to make Super Rugby the most successful comp it can be. And if it was, then it's a no-brainer. But there's no doubt that if you're then splitting up the Kiwi and Aussies across all the sides, all the Pacific Nations players as well, it's going to wreck your cohesion, which is just such an obvious restriction that is in such focus at the moment as well. I can't imagine any international coach from any of those nations going, this is a fantastic idea. I can't wait for all my best players to be split up.
This is true, and it also, it makes it tough on like the academies and things like that. The way that we bring players through and whatever. So, but interesting nonetheless. Anyway, it's something to follow for sure. In other news, we've got Bryn Gatland heading to the Kobe Steelers in 2024, going along with Brodie Retallick from the Chiefs. So I think he's just announced that in the last couple of days. He's been very good, Bryn Gatland. And has, is a Waikato man through and through. And I think, he's just moving on, getting some paid and whatever. It makes sense.
I think, number one, Dad's gone. No, I am joking. It's not the reason. I think it's probably reflective of the fact that Damien McKenzie is in such good form and is signed for a couple more years. So I think the writing's on the wall there, right? Like, he's not going to be the Chiefs 10 for a while. He could have shipped around to yet another Super Rugby franchise, but he's done a lot of that. I think he knows that he's not going to be a long-term All Black, so why not go overseas and earn some good money? He's a quality 10 that plays, controlled, smart footy, and he'll go and collect a handy paycheck playing over there and playing some good footy with Brodie Retallick, which is always nice as well.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll thrive in the top league competition over there. So now, before we get on to some Aussie rugby news of the week, let's just get on to some Springboks, some South African rugby news. It's been a while since we've talked about the old Springboks, but the one thing that just caught my eye that I wanted to bring up is that it looks like the 36-year-old Frans Steyn won't be heading to a 5th Rugby World Cup with the Springboks. A knee injury he has at the moment has kept him out of the 41-man squad. Still possible if you can recover fast enough that he'd be the first one off the rank to be called in for an injury cover. So still possible, not ruling it out, but looks unlikely. I just thought it's epic. I mean, you got to remember this guy, he was the starting inside centre back when he was, 17 or 18 in 2007 for the Springboks. And he's still around, played such a crucial role in the last Springbok 2019 winning World Cup team. So I thought that was huge. But
oh yeah, obviously, just like an absolute legend of the game, and we touched on it a little while ago about Reece Hodge at 27 moving overseas. He's played 100 Super Rugby games already. I could only dream that Reece Hodge turns into what Frans Steyn has been for South Africa. Like the versatility Steyn has, his ability just to control the game with his huge boot, make impact as a big body in both attack and defence. Like he's a quality player that has served them well, as you said, for seemingly 100 years.
Yeah. And otherwise, the only thing that I made of note, we haven't really kept in touch with all of the South African rugby players, but was that Elton Jantjies didn't make the squad with Manny Libbok, someone we kind of just saw emerging in Super Rugby, who's been absolutely crushing it in the last couple of years. So he's the third fly half over for the Springboks. And otherwise, the Springbok squad looks relatively unchanged. Most of the names we know already. So they've got a very experienced squad heading over there.
Yeah, crazy to think that Manny Libbok, he's only 25 years old. It's been a long time since he was the young up-and-coming fly half in New Zealand. Playing in the Super Rugby competition. But he's obviously playing over at the Stormers now. They won a comp last year, the Champions Cup, and then they lost both the URC this year and last year in the final. And I think, did they lose the Champions Cup final this year as well to No. They must have lost a semi or something.
I can't remember.
Because La Rochelle won the Champions Cup.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, just obviously the Storm was going very, very well. So probably reflective of how well they're going, and he's been steering the ship for them.
Yep. And then speaking of Stains and legends, this was great. I thought it was Don, the last kick, kind of like the last dance. The 38-year-old Lobster Morney, as we call him, Morney Steyn, played his last game for the Bulls over in Pretoria. Sounded pretty epic. I think they got a really big crowd in there. Got this standing ovation when he took the field. And then, unfortunately, the Bulls blew a 19-point lead in the Currie Cup and lost to the Cheetahs. So sad way to see him off. But no, mate, speaking of legends, I think he's, I could be wrong. Is he the second or third top scorer in Super Rugby of all time? I think
DC's one.
DC's one. I think he's two.
I think Richie Mo may have overtaken him.
Might have overtaken him. Okay, he's two or three.
But, he's top three. Yeah, he's obviously a legend of the game, and the super boot. Like I remember back when he was kicking like 90-something% for the season. He kicked like 36 in a row at one point, didn't he? It was just absolutely ridiculous, the quality that bloke had off the boot, and nothing seemed to faze him as well. And not only that, but he was never the biggest bloke. And I remember him in Pretoria kicking for distance, and he like up at altitude kicking him 60 like it was nothing as well. Like he's just what a good career, and sad to see it didn't end the way that he wanted. But I mean, us as Aussies know all about that, and Tars fans know all about that for hoops as well.
That's it. Now, speaking of come back to some Aussies, Adam Coleman, a name I was excited with the London Irish falling apart, another premiership team falling apart. I was excited to see possibly would he be coming home, but no, it looks like the Bordeaux-Bègles, I don't know how you say that, but the Bordeaux rugby team over in France look to be the front runners to sign his services. I'd love to know if they are just extending his contract, of which he's pretty much one of the highest paid locks in world rugby, getting paid about £900,000 a year over at London Irish. Could be why they are no longer existing, maybe just the Adam Coleman contract. But no, so he's looking to head over to France, so not coming home, unfortunately. But
I think if he came home, he would get a quarter of that. Genuinely, like at best, he would get 300,000. Like he's earning 1.2 over there. Like it's outrageous. There's just no way in hell, unless he was a walk-up start for the Wallabies. There's no way in hell he's coming home.
It's a tough ask, isn't it? You can't really fault him for not heading home. But no, you that arose your interest, and you had a quick look into who were the other Aussies at the London Irish.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few there, but there's probably one main one that I think is the most interesting. The Aussies that are off contract are Ollie Hoskins, the prop, Rob Simmons, the lock, Joe Powell at half, and Eddie Pullman, a young centre, I think, from Australia, ex-Sydney Uni boy from what I very quickly had a look at. He's kind of early, mid-20s young player as well. So Pullman, you know, who knows, maybe he'll just look for an opportunity at one of the clubs back home, but wouldn't surprise me if he stays over there to develop his career. Probably hasn't played enough to really make a name for himself yet. Joe Powell, equally, I'm not sure he'll see a big future for himself at home. And Simmons has obviously done his dash and retired from the Wallabies. But the name at the front of the list for me is Ollie Hoskins. I think he looked really, really good when he got his Wallabies cap. Was that last year or the year before? Maybe the year before.
Year before.
He looked very, very solid. And with a bit of an injury cloud over some of our props at the moment, not a bad shout to get him in and amongst the squad. I think he could be very, very useful for us. And no doubt we could use the depth in Super Rugby as well. So I'm not sure how enormous his contract is looking at the Adam Coleman numbers. But if we can afford him, it'd be great to have him back.
Yeah, no, he's an experienced campaigner. And absolutely, I agree. Could use some more depth, particularly with a lot of injuries in the front row that seems to be constantly happening. But